Hi and welcome to this video log with me, Wayne, from swimmingcyclingrunning.com. In this video I'm going to list my 5 most important tips to help you swim in open water successfully, especially if you're new to open water. Plus there's going to be a bonus tip at the end, so stay watching right through to the very end of the video. Over the past 2.5 years I've been coaching a group for Badu Sports, taking people through the Blenheim and London triathlons. We started in 2021 when we took 5 athletes through the Blenheim triathlon in just 3 weeks, and believe it or not, 3 of them were non-swimmers. I made a video about that and I'll put a link to it just up here. Now we've continued to do that with more and more competing, and always have a large proportion of people who are either non-swimmers or extremely weak swimmers. At this year's London Triathlon, we have 54 competitors entered. Now to me, as the lead coach, the sole important factor was how we get people through these swims. In other words, what are the most important elements of open water swimming that will guarantee us 100% success, even with initially non-swimmers? So here is my 5-point plan to guarantee you success in open water swimming. Number 1. This is something that no one ever tells you, but is probably the most important piece of information to help you get mentally prepared for open water swimming. It happens more to new swimmers, but it happens to all swimmers at some time or other. At some point you'll be swimming along and you'll suddenly feel, oh, I shouldn't really be here. It's a sudden feeling of tightness in the chest, which means you can't breathe easily and you feel like you don't want to be there at all. Especially true of people wearing wetsuits, which are fairly tight and therefore can feel constricted on the chest. But it can happen when you're not wearing a wetsuit too. The important thing to remember is, once you've recovered from this feeling, it very rarely happens again in the same swim. And the wonderful thing is, once you know this might happen, it frees you up. Everyone I've told this to, when it has occurred, thinks, hang on, I was told this could happen, all I need to do is take my time, calm myself down, get my breathing back into regular breathing, and I'll be okay. Just knowing about the problem gives you the tool you need to actually overcome it. Now we're on to number 2. Let your breathing control your arms, not your arms control your breathing. Now if your breathing is under control, your swim will be under control. But if you let your breathing get hurried and short, you'll soon be out of breath and you'll be struggling. Now I see so many people starting off with their arms going like crazy, 70 to 80 strokes a minute, when they're actually only comfortable with a stroke rate of 50 or 60 strokes a minute. And that means they instantly go into the red, and after about 50 to 100 meters, they're in trouble. So it's important to learn your appropriate stroke rate for the swim you're about to do. You're likely to have 3 separate stroke rates for any particular distance. I mean, for example, the first might be a stroke rate where you can just about finish the whole distance. For example, if it's a swimming event, and that can be 200, 400, 1500, 3.8k. The second is a stroke rate which you can comfortably finish, perhaps for a standard distance triathlon where there's quite a bit of exercise to do after you get out the water. And the third will be a stroke rate where you can easily finish, perhaps for an Ironman event where you really do have a long distance and a lot of time to exercise after you've finished the swim. If in practice you get those stroke rates really nailed in, even with the use of something like a tempo trainer, or sometimes called a metronome, so you literally know exactly the stroke rate that you're going to go off with, you can actually practice that and you'll be ready to race that distance in an actual event. And that just brings us to tip number 3. Put your wetsuit on correctly. If you put your wetsuit on so that it fits properly, it should have a little excess around the crotch area, and because you've lifted the body up, you can also get a little excess underneath the arms. Now worn like that, it gives you maximum amount of flexibility around the shoulders, and that flexibility allows you to extend your arm freely as close to the same feeling as you'd get without a wetsuit at all. Now, wearing a wetsuit that's not pulled up, it pulls the arms down, and as you try to raise the arm, because the torso is stretched, you have to pull against the wetsuit, and that wastes a massive amount of energy. You don't want to waste energy in open water because that gives you that feeling of breathlessness that we discussed earlier. Clearly, that doesn't make sense. You want to feel free, and that will help you breathe easily as you swim. Now we're on to tip number 4. Practice different race scenarios when you swim in open water. Clearly, you can go to open water swimming and swim your race distance and be happy that you're prepared for the race. Now, it surprises me that some people simply do that time and again without variation. There comes a point where doing the same thing again and again and again doesn't really add to your knowledge or preparation. For example, if you want to go faster, and if you want to swim faster, you have to practice swimming faster. And that means going out of your comfort zone. Also, races very rarely go as planned. The adrenaline at the start of the race means you go off often too fast, which hits you exceptionally hard after about 200 meters, and suddenly you're out of breath and in trouble. So it makes sense to try swimming the course faster. And if you find you can't sustain that speed, simply slow it down again and get back into your comfort zone and under control where you can breathe easily. Next time, you may go further at that faster speed, and then you'll come back into your comfort zone again. So we've already talked about starting too fast when the adrenaline hits, but just in case you start too fast, you need to practice that in training. You might want to go, say, 25 meters absolutely flat out, or to the first buoy, knowing that you're going to get out of breath, and then you just slow it down, get back into control whilst you're still swimming. Also, practice swimming in groups so that when there are lots of people around you in a race, it doesn't tend to lead you to panic. In fact, if you can think of any what if, you need to plan to solve that problem, and in training it's the best time to do that. Don't wait until race day because it's too late. Now we're on tip number 5, and this is don't breathe forward when you sight. Now there are 2 reasons not to breathe as you sight. Firstly, you want to keep your head as low as possible in the water when you're swimming. Effectively, think of your head as 10 pounds of ugly fat, and think, would you really want to hold 10 pounds of fat out of the water? The answer has to be no. The higher you hold your head up in the water, the lower your back end actually falls, and that makes you less streamlined, it increases your drag, and of course that just slows you down. You're working harder for every meter you go. Secondly, in a lake the water can be fairly calm and there's often no one in front of you kicking. That's not necessarily true, firstly in a race where there's lots of people, and secondly in the sea or ocean where there are waves. And if that happens, breathing forward can often give you either a mouth or even worse, a lung full of water. Instead, sight forwards and then turn your head to side to breathe as you would normally when you're trying to sight in open water. It means you'll have to sight early in the stroke, but as you pull yourself forward, you just turn to the side and breathe exactly as normal as you're finishing off the stroke. Missing a breath, especially in a race, can lead to a little bit of panic, so make sure you don't take in someone else's kicked water by breathing to the side once you've already sighted. Makes it a lot easier for you. Right, now here's that bonus I promised you right at the beginning, and that is, please warm up before your event. I know it's annoying that most events now don't allow you to warm up in the water, but you all know that a warm-up is very important. With a warm-up you're far less likely to get that feeling of I shouldn't be here that we discussed earlier. So how might you warm up? Well, firstly, you can use your acclimatization to transition as a warm-up. I mean, for example, jog from the swim entrance to your bike, then from your bike to the bike exit, then from the bike entrance to your bike again. And all the time, you should be counting your steps. Because as you count your steps, you'll actually know how many steps it takes to get to your bike. So that has an extra benefit that you won't actually get lost in transition trying to find your bike when you come back in either from the swim or from the bike leg. Okay, so there you have it. The 5 most important tips for successful open water swimming, plus our bonus tip. Remember, sometimes things don't go to plan however well you prepare. In those circumstances, I really implore you to remember the only bad race is one you don't learn from. Okay, happy racing, happy training. Thanks very much for watching.